week. I'm just I'm continually encouraged by engagement in these calls and conversations I'm having throughout the week, just in between these calls. And I just think it's a really neat thing when we can come together in a somewhat organized way, but more so around how can we just share and have some people that can, share with us. There's lots of education out there, lots of resources. And we wanted to do something different and not just be another webinar where we're putting out a bunch of information, but how can we just truly talk and have a good conversation as law firm owners and being in the industry. So I really appreciate just everyone's time and your engagement, and hopefully this has been a value add for you as we continue to put together summaries after the fact and resources, and so we're all in this together. That's what our kids' school keeps saying, and what I keep saying, and it really is true. We'll come out of this together when we go through it, better together when we go through it together. So same sort of flow. I sent that out this morning for like what we're trying to accomplish today, with a little bit of a different focus on people. So to start off, is there anyone that would like to just share, kind of open forum, a good thing, something positive that's happened either in your firm or with your team or even in your personal life over the last week? It's always good to hear good news in the midst of lots of not so good news. Anyone? Wow, rough. It's been a rough week, huh? We've got no good news.
Jamie, I have good news.
Oh, good. Give it to us.
I work as a mediator and an arbitrator. So we've been offering mediations, arbitrations, pre-hearing conference calls, trying to do everything. By the way, son number one, hello.
Hi,
okay. And I've had a tremendous positive response. So many people are like, yeah, let's keep the ball rolling. They're open to Zoom. I've been teaching. I feel like I've become a Zoom master now. I'm like the Yoda of Zoom.
I love it.
So I've taught a bunch of lawyers how to use it. We've done some practice sessions, but they've all been really open to it. And, we've had some success. We've had some virtual mediations where we've had some settlements. So that's my positive thing.
That's
Amy,
awesome.
I do have something.
Yeah,
I just totally forgot. We always forget about the good stuff. Well, I'm Coach Melody with Unwrap You Everyone, and I thank Jamie for inviting me. I am actually in health and wellness, so doing corporate health and wellness. And yesterday I got an email that I've been nominated for the Moonshot, a Challenging Convention Award, and it's for the work that I do in the community, which is, helping people with their, meditation, stress, physical activity, like all the things to make you whole and healthy and well, which is what we need during COVID. So I don't know who nominated me, but it was really exciting, in the midst of it.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so cool. When there's so many things kind of paused or stalled or, stopped altogether, it's always so encouraging to me when I hear about things that are moving forward. Like life is still here, one foot in front of the other, things are still continuing. And I think that's awesome. Well deserved.
Well, thank you.
My good thing is my 6-year-old, he's in kindergarten, and he's just been a little bit slower to kind of catch on to reading and, spelling, getting his vocabulary down, and slow to like want to read, right? And passionate about wanting to read. And they do these lists of vocabulary words: A list, B list, C list, D list, and they want them to get through list G by the end of the school year. And so he started list D and basically in a week mastered all 25 words, which is like, so it took him till now to get A, B, and C, right, in the school year. And then he just did in 1 week, he did one whole list. And my husband got a video of him with flashcards going through every single one with just like a couple tiny little blips. And then at the end of the video, he's so proud of himself and like so excited. It just makes you tear up, watching it, how the pride that he has. And then whenever I got home last night, he couldn't stop writing words. Like he just wanted to keep writing words. And he was showing me like these paragraphs of words that he'd written. And it was just cool. It's like he finally, like the light kind of went on inside of him. And he was finally excited about it instead of it feeling like a chore. So seemingly small, but it was a huge win for our family for the week. So I thought I would share that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to share before we move on? Good things. All right. Well, let's talk about the fear factor. We sort of kicked off our very first week in sharing general fears kind of going into the season of time, and what was plaguing our minds, was keeping us up at night as business owners, law firm partners. We talked then about money, what's really keeping us up at night in terms of dollars and money, and how can we manage our companies in the best possible way financially, make the right decisions that are going to set the firms up for success. We keep saying, we want to make decisions that are going to help us survive the COVID crisis, but we also want to make decisions that are going to help us to still thrive this year. Because we can make decisions to cut spending, but then do our business a disservice through the rest of the year, and not set ourselves up for long-term success. So how can we handle short-term crisis, but with a long-term vision? And I really appreciated like the resources that came out. If you guys haven't joined the LinkedIn group yet, please do so, because there's a lot of resources being shared out there. There's a recap every week in writing from the call that we did. The recording is posted. And then also links to all the different things that we've talked about or that people have shared, so you can kind of have it in one place. And now this week, we really want to focus on people. So, how do we lead people well during this, season of time? What are you worried about? So let's share. What are our fears about leading our teams, leading our families? Maybe legislation changes, are there FMLA changes, unemployment changes that you're concerned about, unsure about? And, as a leader too, you're a person. And is there anything that's, kind of plaguing your mind on how you care for yourself? So anyone, what are your fears?
Jamie, this is Amy Hoganson. I am a family law attorney here in St. Louis.
Hi,
And
Amy.
one of my fears is, it's really tough to network right now, physically network, right? So there aren't the events, there aren't the stuff to go to, and that can be a way for us to get clients as a sort of starting point. Two, it's just a different time right now where people aren't necessarily as interested in moving forward with a legal, well, sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. So one concern I have is really the clientele. Things have been slower. I think at some point it's going to pick up in terms of new clients, but there's not a guarantee of that. And so that's one concern I think we have, is how do you deal with maybe times being slow right now, and how do you look towards the future when maybe there's a boom and you're overloaded, right? So right now we may not have enough, but in the future, maybe the concern is it's all going to come piling in at once. So I think those are kind of two, same fear, it's all client related, but different kinds of things.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And let's talk about that. Thanks for sharing here. I'm going to make a note so we can talk about solutions. We were just, Sarah Marler, I don't know if she's on the call right now, but Sarah and I were just talking about this the other day, getting prepared for what we think will be the tidal wave of Family Law Matters, because there's lots of articles out there right now saying what's happening in other countries that are a little further along in this crisis than we are. And family law is it's picking up, which is, mixed feelings about what it is, but for people in the family law business, good thing to have more business. So how do we prepare for that? What else? What other fears, guys? What do you worry about? Is no one worried about their people?
I'll share two things, Jamie, that I've encountered. One is, I've gotten several calls from friends who own businesses who, are asking lots of employment related questions, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. So, I'm not the guy to field those. And I think a lot of people are grasping for, answers in that field. So that's, that, but then also I do a lot of personal injury work, and my concern isn't necessarily short term because I've got a fair amount of cases in a pipeline that are processing and going fine. It's if I don't have people who are working and traveling and it's kind of a morbid thought, but people who are moving out and about, 2-3 months from now, I may there may be a downturn in those work comp and PI types of cases. So that's where I'm looking right now.
What kinds of employment law related questions are you getting, just more specifically?
Like I've got mainly, I'm starting to get people who maybe have like a second connection who have gotten coronavirus, right? So like I've got a friend who owns a business and has a bunch of truck drivers, and one of the parents of his truck drivers recently passed away, and turns out he had coronavirus. And so his question is, how do I isolate this driver, without all of my other drivers getting upset that I'm giving people paid time off when they don't have it, and like just some really interesting and kind of sticky employment law questions.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of employment questions too. There's several of us here that do that, and it's some of it is the change in the law in terms of the FMLA and the leave that's related, to COVID-19. A lot of our clients don't realize that it has somewhat of a focused application, in terms of who it applies to. So you may only have a couple of employees that it applies to, but quite a few more who think that they're entitled to it, and they may not be. I'm trying to help them navigate that. We haven't seen much in the unemployment yet, but I think we will eventually. We do both sides of that.
And I invited Matt Robinson's on the line too, from Hesse Martone here in St. Louis, to kind of give us some guidance too, since that's what he does, on kind of what he's seeing from a new legislation changes and common questions that are coming up. So I think we should definitely talk through some of those, because I heard some interesting things coming up too about the unemployment, how you can be reducing hours for someone based on trying to survive the crisis, and they can still collect unemployment for like a percentage of that unemployment. And that was like never a thing before. Like you can be unemployed but collecting unemployment, right? All kinds of nuances there, which is interesting. And someone was asking me about work comp. People ask me questions even though I'm not a lawyer. I love being able to say I'm not a lawyer. I can't answer your question, but I know a lot of lawyers that can. Work comp questions, okay, so you're technically unemployed, but you're collecting work comp. Are there any changes to work comp? Because that's only 2/3 pay. And I'm like, well, I have to believe that if they're modifying unemployment, then they have to be modifying the work comp pay as well during this time. I don't know. I got this webinar, this call this morning. Let me ask. So that was one of the questions I've gotten too, is like, for the people that truly do get hurt on the job that are still working, but they would be collecting work comp income, not unemployment. How has legislation changed given COVID, or has it not? And that's still the case, because they would have otherwise, been working. So anyways, all tough stuff and concerns for sure, as being an employer. And having, potentially even spouses and kids that are working but end up in a situation where they've lost their jobs. What else? What other fears?
I have one, Jamie. As an entrepreneur, I work contracts, and the fear is, I don't want to call it a fear, but just not knowing when all this is going to come back, because I was working on like over 18 contracts throughout the quarter. And what was supposed to be my best quarter turned out not so best, because this and now having to transition. The great thing is I was able to transition over to virtual training because more than now, people need wellness because it's a lot of stress and anxiety. People aren't moving, they're staying at home longer. They don't have boundaries. So
Right.
these are things that we need to incorporate. And fortunately for me, now I'm able to do that, but you see a little bit of hesitancy because people, I don't know, have you guys seen it, that they don't want to spend money so much right now, and a lot of people, you know, situations have changed as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. What people are spending money on. I heard someone make a comment the other day. Oh, we cut all of our like frivolous spending, like gifts and meals and entertainment. And part of me, like my initial reaction was, oh yeah, that makes sense because I mean, like no one's in the office. But then I was like, hold on a second. I almost feel like you should maybe not cut that and be like increasing that meals, gifts, and entertainment to like your people, right? And you're like caring for your people. Is there something else that's maybe not needed that could be cut? But it's just interesting, thinking about how people think about expenses differently. Yeah, anything. Thanks for sharing that fear, like business growth, right? Like how do we continue to grow the business given people's different views of wanting to invest in new services and contracts and that sort of thing. What other fears, if any, did anyone want to share that we could address?
Jamie, this is Matt Robinson.
Matt?
Hi, and thanks for inviting me. This is actually my first Zoom meeting, so I hope everybody can hear me well and everything. I know that's a surprise, but our firm uses Microsoft Teams, so we've done a lot of that.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, oh man, you're like a dinosaur now.
I've been on that, yeah, right. My biggest concerns with have been really two things. One is what happens if one of your employees who maybe has to come into the office gets COVID-19 and how that impacts the rest of the office. We've got, that could potentially shut down an entire office and all business if it's not handled right. And the other one is also with the Family Medical Leave Act, the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, people have a right to up to 12 weeks to care for kids who are off school because COVID. And while that's great, what happens if you've got a lot of parents who all take that time off and all of a sudden you're really short-staffed?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, for sure. Sorry, I'm just making some notes so we make sure to address all these. Anything else?
Just personally, I'm a little worried. I've got a 7-year-old girl and she's doing fine during this time, but we're kind of leaning heavily on technology, and I really worry how that's going to impact her in the future.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of parents out there worried about what does this look like for next school year. I mean, from what I'm hearing in terms of chatter, I think everyone sort of reconciled the fact that kids are not going back to school this year. I mean, I think most parents are kind of like, we're just kind of expecting this is the new normal and then summer is going to be here. But what does that look like, August of this year? And are the kids going to be set back, or is it going to be extra stress trying to fit more into the year? Or are they going to not have a summer break? Like all those questions. And I think the good thing is we're all in it together, right? We're all figuring it out together. So no one's, no kid should have a disadvantage over any other one in terms of timing, and what's happening is kind of happening to all of us, which is kind of a beautiful thing to think about. We're on this shared situation globally. It's something that's connecting us all together. And I think that's fair. How do kids adjust during this, and how do we care for them well too, because they're very valuable people in our lives. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because that, my worry is she gets used to entertaining herself through a computer or through a phone. When can we get her off of that stuff and back playing with other children in person?
You know, that's fair. I hadn't even really thought about because I've got 4 kids. So it's like built-in in-person friends. And I said to my husband the other day, I feel like they're actually more creative. Like even though they're on tech because they have each other, every time they go outside, it's like I hear the creative play is more heightened than it has been because they're playing more together than they ever have. But I hadn't really thought about like kids that are single, kids, no other siblings and how that might look different. But that's interesting.
Yeah, I've gotten a kick. I said I'm working from home and I overlook my backyard and I can see a house that has 4 kids. And every time I see those kids, they're all running. They're just running around the house and it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And then sometimes, ah!
Sometimes not fun. They're built-in enemies as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Glenn, did you want to share something?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Glenn Larson. I just joined in a few minutes late. I own a personal injury law firm in Austin. But anyways, on that note, I can relate to the fear or the concern of the children being too tied up by electronic devices as to tag in there. And what I've done with one of my daughters is say the commute time that I normally would be driving in the car, we just probably say add maximum value and go do something outside in the yard together, literally at the exact time that I would typically be leaving for that period of time. That's, for me, typically would have been 30 minutes. And so I think that's kind of a little bit of an added benefit that just, call it given, I don't want to say a gift of something that is very dangerous to the world, but it's an opportunity for time for exercise and, if your kids are into other games or something that normally you'd be sitting in a car doing just that. So just my perspective on that. Block schedule of the time that we normally would be traveling, flights, all that. I mean, we don't have to do that now.
Yeah.
And to kind of piggyback on the marketing, the conversation about expenditures, what I've started to do is the budget that we're not having to spend money on travel wise. We're taking, half, saying, okay, what's half of that number, and putting that back into the marketing perspective to just pound out the referrals as much as we can. Whatever we can do, if we need to help somebody out from not a case standpoint, but just a connection, a card, a note, a basket of, shipment of vegetables, whatever it is, to kind of go old school from a marketing perspective to get to people. But we don't have, I've looked at our numbers yesterday and, we spend so much in travel on our, it's about 30% of our operating budget. And now we don't have that. On the other hand, we have a lot of fears because obviously we do a lot of injury work and there's not as many people on the roadways. So our claims and our court systems, I'm sure this is for people who do litigation. We're not sure what the courts are going to do. And I'd like to hear if anybody has any other perspectives on whether there's any courts out there that are starting to do online hearings or anything like that. It's completely shut down in Texas for any court hearings. And that's causing a logjam in our revenue a little bit, and so we're having to be creative there.
Kim, I'm wondering if you should share too what you're doing with online mediations for Glenn. There you go. That's when the teacher cold calls you. You better be paying attention.
Damn. Sorry. I think I told you guys I have 2 college-age sons who are both home, and they're just talking to me all the time. Well, we have, let me think. What I've been trying to push with the lawyers that I've worked with is to say, look, this is a perfect time to mediate your case when the courts are closed, because you don't have those court deadlines. So you actually have time to prep your client for the mediation. Of course, you would be doing that remotely, but maybe the change in scheduling is freeing up some time to actually get the mediation on the schedule. So many times we struggle with even just getting dang thing on the schedule between lawyer schedules and the party schedule. So there's no reason you can't do it. And I know there are plenty of good mediators who have time and are doing virtual mediations. And, you know, a lot of times for the insurance adjuster, they're participating by phone anyway. So this is old hat for them. I think the people that it's tougher for are the plaintiffs, particularly if they have, maybe they're trying to do Zoom on their phone or something. I have had that happen where it's clunky, but it can work. I mean, I had one mediation where the lawyers were on Zoom, and then when we wanted to do breakout sessions, because their clients were not on Zoom with them, or at least one of them was not on Zoom with them. So then we did a conference call, and, you know, we got it done. It may be, again, I mean, it's clunky, but it can work. And it's a great way, you know, for lawyers, I think, to make good use of this time.
Anyone else wanted to jump in and share anything about that?
I can certainly address the question on the courts and what the courts are doing here. Our Supreme Court, so I'm in Illinois, and the Supreme Court they entered a very general rule, so they've left it to the individual counties. So there's a lot of difference between the counties in terms of what they're doing. In the county where my office is, they have said they'll do conference calls. They haven't said anything about video. I'm sure they would. You know, across the state, what's happening is the emergency type. So criminal within custody, orders of protection, juvenile, mental health, and some of the emergency and or where there are major constitutional issues are involved. That's how the state courts are doing it. Other state courts within the state, I'm aware of some of our specialty courts are continuing to operate. For example, I'm aware of a drug court yesterday in Southern Illinois where they used Zoom for all the participants, and it took a little bit more setup to make sure everybody was able to do it, but they used Zoom, and it took a little longer, but they did that. In federal court, I do a lot of federal criminal work, and of course we have some constitutional issues there. We are set up to do hearings by video if need be. They're encouraging us to get our clients to waive, which they have to waive an in-person appearance. If they don't waive it, they're making arrangements. Supposedly, I haven't heard of that in the Central District of Illinois. But what's happening primarily is we're doing it by video, the hearings that have to occur. But the bulk of them are getting continued.
Yeah, that's a similar thing I've heard. One on the mediations, we had a successful mediation through Zoom. I wasn't personally involved, but it got something done, and it got scheduled and completed very quickly. And so that was great. As far as the courts go, it's moving slow. The video is moving slow as far as I can tell. The federal courts are starting on criminal, like you said, and so I think that things will speed up once people start getting used to that. But it does seem like it's going to take a while. But maybe on the flip side of all this, we can start using that more often and start cutting out some of that travel time that we've all been putting in.
Yeah. If there's one thing I think that's coming out of this for the positive, which there's quite a few positive things, but one of them is, you know, guys, a lot of the changes that these businesses have been making now out of necessity, in all honesty, should have been made years ago, right? I mean, as a business, it's making us, you know, really give a hard look at the way we're operating, and where we were able to maybe sweep things under the rug because we were making enough money before, and now we just can't. And I think that the focus of next week is going to be how can we use our lessons learned from this to like keep some things going, you know, beyond this. I mean, think about the efficiencies gained by being able to use video beyond COVID, right? I mean, how much time lawyers spend in the car driving to the court and back is ridiculous. I mean, we realized we were losing money with one of my clients on their criminal practice, mostly because of the drive time. And them not being able to necessarily bill the way that they would have been billing, and they had clients in all these different counties in southern Missouri, it's like, yeah, it's like you can't even end up serving. It doesn't make sense to serve, especially at the prices in which people can afford to pay. So I'm looking forward, really excited about next week and talking about, okay, what have we learned through this that we can, keep doing that will really benefit our businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say, you made a really good point about, having all the drive time. Hopefully, everybody on the call and around just kind of learn how to fit them in more, because I work with a lot of attorneys, and one thing is it's a stressful job. So now this is kind of taking some of the stress load out. Now you can incorporate things for yourself, like a little bit more exercise, or I heard someone say, they build time in the morning to be with the kids, more family time, more self-time, more time for that self-care. So it's a better balance. I've talked a lot about boundaries. So I think, we can pull that out of it as well.
One of the things I wanted to share to address sort of Amy's fears about, how do we handle, I think it's like two things really. How do we handle networking and engaging with potential clients and current clients and referral network, and we can't do that in person? And then how do we prepare for maybe that overload of when things start to pick back up? And on the networking side, I really like what Glenn said about kind of going old school. And instead of focusing on networking for potential new clients, how do you just re-engage with your existing network of referral sources, even if over Zoom? And how do you re-engage with your current clients? Just picking up the phone and calling clients that maybe even their case, or former clients, maybe their case wrapped up a year ago, but they had a great experience with you, just to check in on them during this time. I had this revelation on an EO call the other day where I was thinking, there were people that I engaged with, a year and a half ago when I was first starting Legal Back Office, that, for one reason or another, I'm just not as engaged with those people. I'm going to start reaching out to them just to see like how they're doing. How are things faring for you? Do you need anything? And in sending 5 emails, only 5 so far in the last couple of days, I already got 2 people responding and saying, oh my gosh, I haven't forgotten about you. We're doing good. We're healthy. Hey, can you call me next week? Because I really want to still talk to you about doing something with you. It was just a random, like, hey, I should just re-engage with my existing network, right? So maybe those are some good ideas, and engaging with current clients or former clients. Glenn and I were just talking a few weeks ago about when you run out of casework, start calling clients, just for no reason but to check in and see how they're doing. Just pick up the phone and call clients. And one of the things I wanted to mention about how do we prepare for the potential overload is now is the time to really, like, the things that maybe we've been sitting on as a business, and not pulling the trigger on, like intake software. How do we overhaul our intake process so it's as efficient and automated as it can possibly be, so we can handle that volume, number one. And right now, I think software companies are really engaged with reduced pricing or temporary reduced pricing, and allowing more flexibility for, okay, if we want to implement an intake software that's going to require 10 users, they'll let us pay for only 2 users just to get it all set up over the next 30 days. Then we start paying for 10 users 60 days from now. There's a lot more flexibility and people willing to negotiate to get those systems in place. Same thing with like digital billing, or any sorts of, if you're still doing print communication with clients for invoicing or status letters or customer satisfaction surveys, like now is the time to utilize your team that's not at capacity, or work with, other individuals to help overhaul those processes. So when this overload comes in, you've at least got processes set up that can be as efficient as possible. Or is now this time to start talking about outsourcing, because now you've got the headspace to think about it. And I know I'm biased when I say that. So whether it's a legal back office or anybody else, is now the time to be thinking about not, how do I get this thing off my plate now? Because I know in 30 days, I'm not going to have the capacity to do it. If you're a managing partner still processing payroll, for example, or doing your own bookkeeping or your own accounting, or you're still managing your own Google ads or whatever it is, the thing, or you're still, managing the invoicing process, what are the things that you can handle them now, but you might not be able to handle them 30 days from now or 60 days from now? Medical records. If you're not already using an outsourced medical records, company, is now the time to be doing all the demos so that you can get prepared to kind of offload that responsibility because it's going to all come in. Technology, 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 and process, process, process. Take the time now to get the procedures in place so that your people can handle what might be coming. Not might be coming, will be coming. And we know because history tells us, we know this is the amount of work we usually get every month. And if that's on pause for a month or two, it's going to start coming, it's going to start flooding back at some point. So I just thought I would share those few things that might be helpful to getting prepared and how do you handle networking in a different way now. What about employment law? Matt, could you maybe take a few minutes to share like some of the common questions you're getting and as business owners, like answers to those questions, how we should be prepping and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about for you personal injury lawyers out there is bone up on potential causes of action for negligent transmission of COVID-19. I saw Illinois has the first lawsuit on file that I've seen anyway, against an employer for exposing the employee to COVID-19 by not taking proper precautions. And so that might be something that fills in the gap given all the less automobile traffic and travel and all that.
Yeah.
And then talking about employment law, we've been extraordinarily busy with the new emergency FEMLA and the paid leave law. The act itself is pretty short, but that means it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The Department of Labor issued some Q&As, then it issued some regulations. The Democrats have issued a letter to the Department of Labor saying that the Department of Labor overstepped its bounds, in particular by saying that if employers just shut down and lay everybody off, then they don't have to pay paid sick leave. And so that's still a fight that's going to go on, and there's going to be a lot of room for interpretation for courts if employers are laying folks off and denying sick leave, which right now under current regulation is okay. But once you get requests for sick leave, then you've got to worry if you then make the decision to lay off, then that opens you up for a discrimination claim that you made the decision to lay off once people started asking for paid sick time. So as those requests roll in, it gets more and more dangerous to decide I'm just going to lay everybody off. And then the other thing is if you have work to be done, if you just lay somebody off for 2 weeks and then bring them back, they're still entitled to 2 weeks of paid sick leave that they didn't take. Just because they were off for 2 weeks doesn't mean now they're not entitled to it. And so we've been getting a lot of questions from employers about that, and also about we represent a lot of employers that have unions that represent the employees, and the unions are all asking the employers for their policy on how they're protecting their employees that are having to go to work. We've got a lot of construction companies and food manufacturers. They're all still working because they're essential services. And so we're getting a lot of requests for policies. OSHA just recently issued a poster. It's not something you have to hang, but it's got a lot of good ideas about how to protect your employees, as far as trying to distance them, making hand washing stations available, and that sort of thing. I'm not sure if you're interested. I could do a little deeper dive in the paid sick leave and the emergency FEMLA if anybody's interested in that.
Well, yeah, and if you have any like good links, Matt, that you think might anything that website that's easy to read or a blog or something, just post them or send them to me and we can include them as well. I'm glad you mentioned about the OSHA poster not being required, because I've seen like mixed things about new poster requirements. Are there any now that are new that are required?
Yeah, the Department of Labor has a poster that you've got to hang that informs people about their rights to the 2 weeks of paid sick leave and to the up to 12 weeks of emergency family medical leave act. And the United States Department of Labor, if you just search for US Department of Labor COVID-19, they've got a page dedicated to gathering resources. And there's a lot of great stuff on there. I've found myself going to that website a lot.
Okay. Jeff also asked here in the chat, what about exemptions for small employers under 50 employees for the child care piece?
Yeah, right now, there is a very limited exemption for that, but you've got to show that that really allowing the paid leave would threaten the viability of your business, and it's kind of a tough showing. And so, if you've got a lot of folks asking off, it may be worth looking into that, but it's a bit of a long shot. What I would recommend doing is trying to talk to each of these folks and seeing if what kind of flexibility they have. If there's in a 2-parent household, are they flexible as to, can they come in 1 week and not come in the next week? Can they in some way take the leave intermittently in a way that'll allow them to get the work that you need to get done, but also allow them time to keep an eye on their kids?
Are there penalties for not posting the new FFCRA poster from the DOL?
You know, not in the law itself does not list a penalty for not posting it. But, you know, and the Department of Labor has issued a 30-day stay on enforcement actions. So for right now, folks are good, but I've got to think that at some point that hole is going to be plugged with some sort of a fine, statutory fine or penalty.
What advice would you give on how to adjust when someone in your office has had someone with COVID?
Well, you know, if somebody in the office, if a relative or a friend or somebody has had it, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were exposed to it. So I think it's a matter of talking to them and finding out, did they spend time with this person? How close were they? And also making it clear that if they develop a fever or any symptoms, if they have trouble smelling, any of those symptoms we've been hearing about, is to don't come into work or report it, and so that it can be addressed. If you've had an employee at your office that has been diagnosed, that's going to cause a lot of problems. The other employees are legitimately worried now whether they've been exposed, and so you know, getting that employee out of the office, doing a deep clean of the office, maybe shutting down the office for a day to get that deep clean done, and making sure that you've got plenty of hand sanitizer and those sorts of things, hand washing.
I told the funniest story 2 weeks ago where I had to get a rental car because I had some car trouble, and you know how it goes with insurance, you have to get it fixed right away or else they start to claim that, you know, your accident, you know, the things that happened to the car, whatever. I had to get it fixed right away, even in the midst of all this stuff. So I go to pick up the rental car, and I really just got it for emergency purposes. You know, no one's really going anywhere. I haven't even driven it. It's been sitting in my front parking lot, but I have it since I have 4 kids. And if I'm in an emergency, I want to have a vehicle, you know. And I go in, and it's in this dingy basement. This Hertz in Clayton, if you've ever been there, it's literally in this like dungeon of a small, tiny room, dirty. And I walk up, and the lady's fondling all these keys, like all the key fobs, putting them in the bag. And I ask her if she has any hand sanitizer. And she says to me, I only have a little bit left, and corporate told us not to let clients use it and to only use it ourselves. And I just I couldn't help but laugh and cringe all at the same time. But she did say, but there is a sink over there with soap. And I was like, that's even better. I'll do that. I'll take that. But I just thought it was kind of interesting because corporate Hertz, the rental car company, couldn't get any more hand sanitizer and get it out. So they told them not to give it to customers and just to use it themselves. Just an interesting scenario. What about the, anyone have any input on like the growing the business when people want to cut spending or pause new contracts for service providers? Like, is there any just good input from the group on, how can we address those fears or give some support ideas or anything of the like? I mean, I think one of the things I would say too is kind of what I said earlier about going back to that existing network. One of the things I never really had much time for before, and whether I want to do this or whether I should do it is two completely different arguments. But, all the people that reach out on LinkedIn through emails and say, oh, the sales, hey, I'm this sort of person, I do this sort of business, would love to connect with you. I'm saying yes to more of those people too, that I might not have otherwise had much time for before. Connecting with the network that seems like it's a good fit for you, or maybe they don't seem like they're a great fit, but it's still just continuing to have conversations about your business with anyone that's willing to have a conversation. Anybody else want to share anything?
Jamie, this is Glenn. Can I share something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would just say that, adding value to the market share that you wouldn't typically, I see this as an opportunity for indirect client acquisition. In other words, a branding message, anything you can do on a social media or just connecting with people, old clients mainly. That's what I've done. Not necessarily that they need your services, but if you can create that human connection with them and send that as your brand, then when they do need you, you're going to be at the top of the list, period. And then I think I'm calling on myself that, yeah, that's all good, but what's the follow-up? Once this, like maybe there's a message that you reconnect with the people, you talk to them, you're compassionate, all these different people you communicate with, social media, whatever, but get someone in your firm to, which in my firm it's Kelly, to make a list of when this is over, how are we gonna celebrate? How are we gonna, or what are we gonna do to really be ready to say, okay, it's time to do business together, and what's that launch look like? And so, just to use an analogy, a long time ago in 2008, in the hotel industry, there were several hotel chains that started cutting employees, cutting all kinds of stuff. And there's two that said, you know what, we're going to find that market share that those competitors are losing because they're cutting value. And we're going to, even though we're not, for example, in this situation, we're not going to have the travel costs, we're going to move to the branding and expand. And yeah, it's going to suck and we're going to have to find the money to do it. But when those, for y'all that have more corporate clients or larger contractual agreements with people, maybe there's competitors that are cutting services that we can capture. Or I had a call with a guy yesterday, an injury firm in Oklahoma that is looking to expand to a couple different arenas. What they've done is basically do competitor research, figure out they wanted to go into bankruptcy, for example, and some other types of law, which I don't agree with, but that's my personal opinion. But what they did was, what's it going to take to hire that other really good employee that works for that competitor that we know is about that, and that competition is cutting people left and right. And how can we take that person on and add value and bring that market share back? So it's a little bit of strategic money flow conversation, but I think there's a follow-up that's needed in addition to the connecting with the people now once we make progress on this topic.
Yeah, that's great. No, thanks for sharing that. Jeff, did you want to ask your follow-up question of Matt? About workers' comp?
Yeah, I see that the question about, some people, workers' comp, there's a threshold under which you don't have to have workers' comp insurance. It's a pretty small threshold. I think 6. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but it's a pretty small threshold. But if you can voluntarily purchase health insurance or workers' comp insurance, and then benefit by the liability protection it gives you. So if an employee sues, they've got to go through workers' comp instead of being able to sue you civilly. And for small employers, I think for small employers that have a workforce that is still coming to work or is going to places, their work is taking them to places where they might be exposed. If it's taking them out publicly to interact with others, I think it'd be a good idea to voluntarily get that workers' comp coverage so that if they claim they contracted COVID-19 due to their work-related activities, then they'd have to go through the workers' comp commission instead of the court system.
Hey, on that workers' comp note too, I was going to mention, I know one of the fears was, hey, in work comp cases and PI cases maybe slowing down during this time, how do we continue to maybe generate business or, prevent what could be an ultimate really big lag? And one of the things that was really interesting, because it actually affected one of our team members, and I hadn't thought about it, is her husband was in an accident at work. I mean, this is just a few days ago. And the accident was primarily caused because a driver of a, semi-truck actually wasn't following the new protocols because of COVID. So they've got all these new, procedures in place, safety procedures for COVID. And there's this procedure now where, the driver has to stay in the truck, not get out of the truck. And they used to get out of the truck while it was being loaded. So the forklift driver loads the truck. And then actually to keep the truck from, like going anywhere or moving or whatever, they have these like jack things, I guess. Well, it's a huge yellow jack thing. This is a new procedure. Drivers aren't supposed to start moving until that jack thing is moved away. Well, the driver wasn't following the current procedure, ended up pinning the forklift driver like in between another vehicle or this jack thing and the truck. Broke ribs, fractured vertebrae. Couldn't stay in the hospital as long as that he probably really should have to recover because coronavirus, all the things, right? And it kind of popped up in my mind, we might see actually more workers' comp claims, maybe not personal injury, but there might be an opportunity to be, marketing and getting the brand in front of those essential workers that are in union-based jobs. And I realize we have like defense attorneys on the line here and we have plaintiffs attorneys on the line here. So I'm careful in my recommendations, but we probably will see some issues come out of this because people either aren't familiar with the new procedures or they're just, they know them or they were communicated, but they didn't read them or they read them and they're not following or whatever but I'm curious to see kind of how that shift changes and if we'll see more actual work comp issues during this time. Because of those essential workers and changing procedures and lack of good communication. You can't get everyone in a room and train them like you used to be able to. So that's just kind of a thought on maybe marketing shifts a little bit away from PI and onto work comp in those essential worker sorts of jobs. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, and Jamie, one of the things that I've been sort of tracking and following is I do a pretty fair amount of work comp is, when you shift your employees to work at home, right? So normally you've got them in an office, you've got a pretty controlled environment for injuries, right? So one of the topics I've seen discussed is what happens if you've got an employee who's working at home who gets hurt, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that's going to be covered by work comp at this point. And I guarantee you there will be those cases. And then the other thing I've been following, and there's sort of an effort, I think a couple of states have already started the process, is creating a presumption for healthcare workers, first responders, things like that, that if they contract coronavirus, that it is presumed that they got it at work as opposed to anywhere else. Mm-hmm. Sort of rebutting that prevailing factor discussion that we always have on those cases. So
Sure, kind of interesting.
there's going to be a lot of weird issues that pop up in comp from all this stuff.
Well, we're at 12 o'clock here. I'd love for us to wrap up by having Coach Melody actually do some. So I asked Coach Melody, who's a self-care coach and health and wellness coach for companies, to be on with us today, because when we talk about people, it's really easy for leaders and for business owners. We're always thinking about everybody around us, right? And we're thinking about our customers, we're thinking about our employees, we're thinking about our vendors, and it's easy to forget about ourselves, right? And how are we caring for ourselves as leaders who are carrying this enormous burden, and parents who are carrying this enormous burden for our children. And so I wanted Coach Melody to hop on and share maybe some tips with us or some ideas, because I know, Coach Melody, you probably have a magic button somewhere, don't you, to just remove all the stress off our shoulders in life, or some sort of magic dust.
Well, I would be the billionaire on the call if that happened. I recommend really does take a little bit of action on your part. But I want to just say thank you to Jamie for inviting me. It means a lot. Like, you guys are putting on this call to help each other, but from a business standpoint, but helping yourself from a mental and just emotional and your own wellness is important too, because like she said, we often forget about ourselves. And what I would like to offer up, I can't do it today because I wasn't really prepared to, but maybe on the next call when I go to companies and do their wellness, I do like a meditation for a couple minutes, just showing you how easy. We could just do 2 minutes next week. If you guys are cool with that, I'll have everything queued up, and it's just a way I can show you just proper ways to breathe and just let some of it go. Because one thing that I've learned, I've been on a lot of these calls with different companies and organizations. We have good days and bad days, guys. It feels okay sometimes, and it just feels overwhelming. And we have to be able to understand that, kind of embrace it, and then, find some other activities outside of work, outside of just what we do, because we go. And right now we are kind of in situations where we can't do as much as we want to, but just embrace what you can. I definitely recommend making sure everyone is doing some form of physical activity. We're at home, and naturally we move more when we're working because you're running to the courthouse, you're running to different places. But now, being at home, more at your home office or, office, if you're able to go there, you're still not moving around. I've been researching the physiological aspect that has on people and the way it ages your body. So I'm really encouraging people to make sure you're moving and break it up, do a little bit in the morning, maybe 10, 15-minute increments, and then you can move into the afternoon, late night, take a walk with the family, just make it fun. And also just finding some activities that you enjoy, and not just with your family, but we have to make sure we're having boundaries with our families as well, because we're all together and they sometimes impede on your private time. So kind of having those, hey, mom is in the office or dad is in the office, I need my, time. I think some of those will help. I hope that it was something, even if it's not new and you're not doing it, then it's still good because it's a reminder, because it's not about knowing, it's about doing.
That's good. Thank you, Melody. I really appreciate that. I think it's important that we all just remember ourselves and, our family too. I appreciate that Matt actually brought up one of his fears about, his kid, because it's easy to be thinking about our business all the time and the work that we're not getting done, or how we're going to get it done, or all the things, and forget about, how our little ones are being affected. So I appreciate us always starting with positives and ending with some sort of like motivation, and how can we be caring for ourselves and our personal lives too. So with that, we'll wrap it up for the week. And thank you all again for your time until next week, where we'll be talking about using our 2020 vision to launch into the rest of 2020. Clever, right? Clever. All right. Love you all.
Have a great week.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.